Greeting to all of you. Phương Thảo is honored to always accompany you in watching the news bulletin in 24 Hours channel. Our bulletin provides the latest and most accurate news about the social order and security situation, as well as the latest international news that has occurred during the day. Now let's take a look at the main information for today.
Welcome back to China Flood Today. Dear viewers, with the power of the strongest storm, wherever Super Typhoon number 2 passes, it leaves behind a scene of devastation, with wind speeds at the storm's core reaching 250 km per hour, gusting up to 290 km per hour. Reuters has recently provided the latest updates on Super Typhoon number 2 as it made landfall in China. According to the channel, the Super Typhoon showed signs of weakening after entering the northern part of the East Sea today. Estimated wind speeds at the storm's core were 250 km per hour, with gusts reaching 290 km per hour, causing 2 Chinese Coast Guard ships and a massive offshore drilling platform named Hainan 686 to collapse and sink in the East Sea. In addition, hundreds of Chinese fishing boats were swept away, resulting in significant human and material losses. This incident once again shook the authorities of Xi Jinping, as earlier Typhoon Bonbi also sank a large naval vessel and a large-scale civilian ship belonging to China. Currently, the authorities have yet to locate the sunken ships from the previous incident, and now they have to face the strongest super typhoon in the world, Typhoon number 2. Information was promptly confirmed and reported by the Postal News of Hainan this morning. At 4 a.m. today, the super-strong Typhoon number 2 made landfall in the East Sea, near the Hainan archipelago and Fu Lam Island, causing massive waves and fierce winds that created towering columns in the sky. It sank 2 Coast Guard ships, a geological survey vessel, and a massive drilling platform, resulting in extremely heavy losses for China. The most horrifying aspect is the heavy rain accompanied by massive tornadoes, which blew away many Chinese fishing boats. High-level officials in Beijing, along with dozens of helicopters and hundreds of rescue and relief ships, are taking action. However, according to the information we have, due to the extreme strength of this super typhoon and the appearance of massive tornadoes, 2 rescue helicopters and 5 rescue ships were sucked in, forcing the rescue team to quickly retreat to the shore as they couldn't approach the area. Ladies and gentlemen, Typhoon number 2 is believed to be an extremely powerful storm, one of the strongest in the world, currently sweeping across the East Sea. The forecast for the next 24 hours until tomorrow morning predicts that Super Typhoon number 2 will gain strength and directly hit the central region of China, causing great fear among the Chinese people. In addition to this typhoon, a new storm has recently hit the Philippines. According to the latest statistics this morning, at least 7 people have died due to heavy rain and landslides in the Albay province as the storm made landfall in the Philippines last night. The strongest storm of the year has caused numerous houses to lose their roofs, severed many power lines, and caused flooding in multiple areas, affecting 31 million people. Local residents had to recover the body of 1 victim in the storm in Conabaton, Albay province, Philippines. The previous recorded super typhoons were Haiyan in 2013 and Meiji in 2016. Many areas in Manila and Albay province were submerged after Typhoon number 2. The typhoon is expected to leave the Philippines and head towards the East Sea later today. It is projected to move northward, aiming at Dongsha Island, China's Shisha Islands, and Vietnam's Hong Sa, before making landfall in China directly. According to calculations by Reuters, the current wind force is showing signs of increasing, and within the next 12 to 24 hours, it could reach 255 km per hour as it advances towards the coastal areas of China. We will continue to update you on the developments in the upcoming bulletins. Now, please switch to the second segment of the program. Ladies and gentlemen, the East Sea is a gateway to the outside world. Our country, Vietnam, has favorable conditions for trade, as the coastline stretches from north to south. However, the more convenient it is for Vietnam, the more difficult it becomes for China. For the Chinese Navy to escape into the world, they must mostly pass through Vietnam's territorial waters. This is something that China never wants to depend on Vietnam for. Therefore, the Chinese people always harbor ambitions to claim the entire South China Sea and turn it into their own backyard. With their cunning and deceptive tactics, they have drawn a 9-dash line, also known as the Cow's Tongue Line, claiming over 80% of the South China Sea. This line, depicted on an ancient map they constructed, forces countries with shared maritime borders with China to recognize its legitimacy. However, all ASEAN countries except for Cambodia have refused to acknowledge this Cow's Tongue Line. The International Court in The Hague has also rejected China's illegal claims. Nevertheless, China disregards all international laws and imposes its own rules on other nations, relying on its status as a large country with one of the world's most powerful naval forces. For many years, ASEAN countries have lost in this game, as in legal terms, if 1 out of the 10 ASEAN countries does not agree, the consensus cannot be considered legally binding. The issue of the Cow's Tongue Line in the South China Sea, during the recent ASEAN summit held in the US, was supported by Prime Minister Hun Sen of Cambodia. As a result, tensions have escalated between the Chinese Navy and the navies of ASEAN countries, particularly the Vietnamese Navy. The US might intervene as a third party in the conflict in the South China Sea to deter China. Simply put, the US does not accept China's dominance over the South China Sea. Beyond the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone, all the sea lanes in the South China Sea are considered international waters. China does not have the authority to impose bans on the passage of ships worldwide, as it has done in the past. China has no right to prevent the passage of other countries' vessels through the South China Sea and demand permission and fees. The conflicts of perspectives and positions have led to continuous maritime disputes, with Vietnam's waters in the South China Sea being the center of naval clashes. Ladies and gentlemen, the conflict in the South China Sea is still fierce between the Chinese Navy and the Vietnamese Navy. It can be said that China has gone mad when intelligence from Hoa Nam China confirmed that Vietnam and the US have joined forces and signed a bilateral military agreement. This is the main reason behind China's attacks on Vietnamese islands, rocks, and vessels in the Hong Sa, Paracel, and Truong Sa, Spratly, archipelagos. However, there are many other factors, including a significant impact from Cambodia. We still remember the ASEAN summit held in 2020 in Singapore, where Cambodia assisted China by supporting its Cow's Tongue Line in the South China Sea. And this time, during the ASEAN summit in the US, Cambodia once again affirmed that the Cow's Tongue Line in the South China Sea belongs to China, based on China's ancient map. It is said that China has used Cambodia as a useful tool, simply needing a small Cambodia to defeat the other 9 Southeast Asian countries. However, everything has two sides. China's use of Cambodia as a card is like a double-edged sword. The Vietnamese people were aware that China would use Cambodia as a pawn in this summit. Meanwhile, if 1 out of the 10 ASEAN countries does not agree, then ASEAN cannot win against China regarding the 9-dash line in the South China Sea. Therefore, Vietnam prepared a new plan that China never expected, which is to join hands with the United States in bilateral military cooperation. Another factor that forces the US to intervene with China is that Vietnam has allowed the US to exploit shared resources in the South China Sea. Thus, when China encroaches on Vietnam's waters, it means they are encroaching on US interests. At that point, Vietnam doesn't need to speak up. The US Navy has already taken action against China. This is how Vietnam applies the strategy of borrowing the enemy's knife from Ton 2S-36 stratagems. Frustrated by Vietnam's tactics, China has slandered Vietnam as a betrayer who bites the hand that feeds it, accuses Vietnam of leading enemies into its own house, and drives away those who bring China's essence out of the house. The Chinese have not been lacking in derogatory terms to defame the Vietnamese people, threatening Vietnam multiple times to cancel the bilateral military agreement with the US. Ladies and gentlemen, the distant South China Sea. If neither China nor Vietnam reports on events occurring beyond the sea, it is difficult for anyone to know what is happening there. The question here is why there has been very little news about the South China Sea lately, while the conflict between the Vietnamese Navy and the Chinese Navy is still raging. In response to this question, We present the following arguments based on the evidence collected since Xi Jinping took power as General Secretary and President in 2012. The Chinese Navy has been ordered to attack the Vietnamese Navy on all fronts, primarily in the East Sea, South China Sea. However, a directive from Xi Jinping clearly states that the attacks should be at a moderate and small scale, taking bites little by little instead of escalating into a full-blown war. This is China's strategy of gradually encroaching, like a spider eating a strawberry. The Chinese military, including the Navy, has successfully implemented this approach. Xi Jinping is notorious for his cunning nature. He steals while building the image of China as a country that loves freedom, peace, and benevolence. He wants the world to view China as the most advanced civilization to learn from. Many countries have been deceived by China's propaganda. For this reason, the conflicts in the South China Sea between the Chinese Navy and the Vietnamese Navy have been concealed by China, preventing the media from reporting on them. Meanwhile, Vietnam, with its weaker position, still relies heavily on China, especially in terms of goods. It must be acknowledged that since 1990, when trade between the two countries flourished, Vietnam's rapid development was due to Chinese goods. Vietnam also does not want to lose China as a friend due to their shared communist ideology. In the past, China has spent money and efforts to assist Vietnam in defeating the United States. Therefore, the Vietnamese people remain silent and do not report on the events occurring in the South China Sea.
We sincerely thank you all for your attention and viewership. Please like, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to receive the fastest and most accurate news update from 24 Hours channel. Goodbye and see you in the next videos.